Welcome to Slasher Sunday and Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Time to talk about a really family friendly, sweet,
Wholesome.
joyous, wholesome,
Wholesome. A
wholesome,
wholesome.
wholesome time at the movies.
Yes.
Uh, let's get inside of this movie and talk about it. So, Inside is a movie that I saw when it came out, and there was all this hype around it that it was this super gruesome, insane, wild, crazy French extreme extravaganza. And I guess I just hyped myself up for it too much. I was expecting it to be. I think that's always what happens, right? Like when people overhype things. Even if a film has plenty of what has been promised, it can just seem to never be enough. And that's
Hmm.
why hype kills, is because
Yeah.
your brain is always going to exaggerate things to the nth degree. I guess depending on who you are, right? Like if I said this movie was crazy to a normie and I
Oh,
showed it to them,
yes.
they'd be like, "You didn't prepare me. This is way crazier than you thought than you said." But when you're talking about someone like me who's a total fucking psychopath and likes, really, really fucking insane, gory graphic films, I can definitely get my mind in a place because people were like, "Oh my god, this is next level insane," and it just wasn't for me at that time. But now, having gone back and rewatched it, it's definitely graphic and crazy. It's just, you know, I, I don't know. I don't think anything's ever gonna be that insane where I'm like, oh my god, right? Like this is
Yeah.
too much even for me. I guess that's probably just never gonna happen. And
Yeah.
I do I even want that to happen? I don't
Probably
know.
not. I mean, I think,
I don't
okay,
even know
like,
what that would look like.
well, okay, because here's the thing. I do think that, like, if, like, I like seeing gore and I like seeing, like, messed up horror films for sure, because I think that there's a cathartic experience to like seeing things like horrifically portrayed, of course, and then also just from like an artistic standpoint and like maybe a morbid curiosity of like watching people do like practical effects for gore. It's very fascinating, and like there is just that, like, again, like I said, morbid curiosity. But I think when it gets to the point where it's like nauseating, that's not fun for me. Like, I don't want to
Mm.
be like nauseous. I don't want to feel like I'm going to pass out or like really like super, like, because obviously the point of horror is to kind of get under your skin and bother you. But I think that there's a line between it being like traumatizing and it still being entertainment. So, like, for
Mm.
someone like you who can withstand like a really high level of like messed up shit, if it crosses that threshold to the point where like you're like actually upset by it, like I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Some people might disagree. Some people might like literally be seeking that type of an experience, and like to each their own. But at least for me, and I think probably for you, I don't think that's like what you're looking for. Like, getting shocked and having that kind of, impact when you watch something like that can be fun, like the shock value of things. But when it gets to something where it's just like maybe too real or like too disturbing, I don't know.
Mm.
I think it loses its appeal for me as far as like entertainment goes.
Typically when it comes to like shock films that I've watched in the past, whether it's like August Underground films or guinea pig films or whatever, when I was going through that phase of my life and I was watching like the most extreme things and Serbian films, Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, and the Burning Moon, and I went through this very curious phase in my life. I think all horror fans who are like into extreme films go through this, where they're like, I gotta seek out the most hardcore. I've got to see what's the most insane, the cannibal holocausts and whatever. And you know, I'd say the common thread for most of those films is that they're all very like they're shock for shock's sake, and most of them are really poorly made
Mm-hmm.
and are really, they have no artistic merit to them. They're not presenting any kind of valid entertainment or message or really anything other than trying to shock the audience, which I've always found to be a chore.
Mm.
Um, watching the August Underground movies really turned me off to that because they were just garbage. They genuinely had no purpose other than to be as vile as humanly possible. And that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like that, it just bores me
Yeah.
more than anything. I just sit there and I'm like, okay, I'm not like, I get it. I get like, fucking a dead baby corpse in a bathtub full of like body parts and stuff. Like, yeah, really, it just comes down to what's the most fucked up thing we can possibly put on screen. Getting together, putting your heads together, and being like, what's the most awful things ever? Like child rape, murder, necrophilia, all these things, and it's like, but what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
that's it. That's just a shock. And a movie like this actually has a storyline.
It
It
does.
actually like has performances that are memorable. It has a purpose to it.
Yes.
There's an
And
entertainment value to it outside of how graphic it is.
yeah, and
And that is
there's
always going to trump any kind of fucking like pure shock
I
film.
agree. Yeah, I have no interest in like all the other stuff you described. Like I have never seen August Underground or like any of those films, and I have no
It's no
interest in
point.
seeing them
A
because
Serbian film's a good movie.
I don't want to I love gore, but I don't need it for like like you said, like shock for shock value. But I think that this film, like you said, not only does it have the storyline and everything, but it also has like an artistic quality because when we were watching this, like especially, in the beginning of the film, like before things kind of ramp up and go crazy, there are so many shots in this that are like eerie and scary
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
atmospheric. And I loved that. Like I think that, this could easily turn into some type of ghost movie is what it feels like. It felt very like just like otherworldly the way that there's certain shots, especially with the antagonist, like when she's entering the house and like outside of the window and just all of that, the lighting and everything. It's great. And I also think that everyone's performance in this is really wonderful too. It's not just like, I mean, it's clearly like a low budget film, but it has like a really nice quality to it in terms of like performance, and also like you can tell that they use their budget like well, especially with what happens with the gore and everything. um but yeah, I think that there's a lot of like really great qualities to this film. It is something that I think, like you've said, maybe a casual horror fan who isn't really used to seeing a lot of gore or like messed up situations, I think that they would be really bothered by this. And I
Sure.
think that's totally valid. One of the parts of this movie that does actually freak me out that I like didn't like, but it was like it definitely like is it important is that we get like the babe. I guess we should say what it's about, although we're doing a spoiler discussion, but the baby's perspective, like when things are happening and you get like a flash to like the baby inside the womb while it's being like knocked around, and like that's messed up. I was like, oh, that's no, I don't want to see that. That poor kid.
That's one aspect of the film that I'm actually pretty surprised that more of the horror community, because this is a pretty beloved film in the horror community, and the directors of this movie have never really been able to recapture that success with a lot of their audience. I know that a lot of friends of mine, Travis Gillespie being one of them, who is an enormous fan of this film and has always been kind of chasing the dragon, so to speak, with their filmography post Inside, because this was, I think, a directorial debut for
Mm.
them. No, I'm like positive it is. And they followed this up with Livid, which I think is the inspiration for Abigail. It's a very, very similar film, which I love. I actually think it's more stylish. I think it's a great film, and they've had a wide array of films since, including like The Deep House, which we watched, which was a found footage underwater movie, which is a
Very
very,
unique.
very hard film to conceptualize and
Yeah.
to actually accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew their limitations just with the premise itself, because water is murky, and
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to do it in almost like a one take kind of thing. And I was like, oh man, this is one hell of an endeavor.
Very
So
ambitious,
very, very
very
ambitious.
unique too.
They also did Candisha,
Yeah, which we loved.
which we were big fans of. That
Yeah.
has some insane gore.
And
Um,
great like visuals and monster design and everything. We loved that.
they also did the Soul Eater, which I think we did this year.
We liked very
Um,
different
very
from
different.
all of these.
Much more of a a
Like a
police
thriller.
procedural
Yeah.
kind of detective, almost like Seven.
But again, one thing that I think is really clear is that they just have a great eye for atmosphere too. I think even though all these films are like kind of wildly different from each other, they all have such great like contained universes and like a feel to them,
Yeah.
which is really nice because sometimes when you watch, I mean, this might be a thing that you're looking for where you follow directors because you're like, they always have the same like feel. Like, for example, Mike Flanagan, I would say, does this.
Mm.
And I like Mike Flanagan for that reason, where I feel like all of his stuff has like a certain vibe to it. But with these movies, they all feel very different to me, which is interesting and cool.
Mm. They also did a movie called Among the Living, as well as Leatherface, the Texas
Mm.
Chainsaw Massacre prequel, which I like stylistically. I think that they have a good eye for style, but I don't like the movie as a Texas Chainsaw film.
Mm.
It's almost like a Halloween 5 to me, where like if I disconnect it from the franchise, I appreciate the film much more because they're very much trying to do their own thing. But this, like the twist that they tried to add with Leatherface being like the handsome guy and not the like fat, mentally disabled guy in the movie, it was really dumb. I don't know what the decision
I'm
was
into
there.
it.
But that was just, anyway. So I think that's every film they've made, but
Mm.
I've enjoyed every film they've made, honestly. They've never made anything that I've been like, oh no, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
Leatherface is probably my least favorite film they've
Mm.
made, which is a shame because I was really excited when they were making that. I was like, oh, the guys who did this and that, this is going to be graphic as fuck and whatever. But obviously we're doing this because it is a Christmas movie, technically. Um, there's always this
Technically.
there's always this debate, right, on what makes a Christmas movie, right? Like the endless one online, of course, is Die Hard, and is it a Christmas movie? And everyone
Right,
goes
right.
back and forth, and it's like, who gives a fuck? Um,
Yeah, it's like a really tired debate.
it's as silly. It's like
It's
pineapple on pizza.
yes,
It's
it
like, I don't give
is.
a fuck, dude. If you
Yeah.
like it, if you eat it. If you don't, you don't. If you think it's a Christmas movie, then you do. I don't give a fuck. Weirdly, though, Die Hard 2 never gets thrown into that conversation when it's also set on Christmas and is
Yeah.
just as Christmassy as the first one. So it's always odd to me that the second one isn't included in that discussion. But regardless, it's like, if it's set on Christmas, then it's a fucking Christmas movie.
I agree.
And it's pretty
I
simple.
think what really comes down to it though, because like we've watched a few other films, this month trying to kind of stick with that holiday Christmassy theme, where it's set on Christmas or Christmas Eve or it's around Christmas, but it like doesn't feel like a Christmas movie. I would say this one kind of falls into that category, but for good reason, because our protagonist, I guess she is, yeah, she lost her husband in a car accident recently, and like she's just isolating and depressed, and like there would be no reason for her to be decorating for Christmas or anything. But you made a good point where there could have been more.
Yeah, the missed opportunity here with the film is that the holidays are a time where most people, who are normal, quote unquote, and happy, the holidays are wonderful for them. But the flip side of that, and something that we don't discuss enough, is the holidays are a really treacherous time
Yeah.
for people who are alone or are depressed or aren't in the best place mentally. The suicide rate exponentially goes up during the
Yeah.
holidays because there's everyone around you is having this wonderful time. And in the movie, she sees this couple and she's like photographing them, and there's, of course, she's lamenting the loss of her family and whatever. they could have honed in on that more. The fact that they set this on Christmas, the whole point of setting this on Christmas is that the holidays are really tough on
Yeah.
people who don't have family, who don't have loved ones, who don't have friends and whatever to spend it with, and to get that kind of like joyous communal experience.
Hmm.
And I feel like with this, setting it on Christmas, the whole point of that is to show that she doesn't get to spend this Christmas with her husband, and she's supposed to deliver the baby on Christmas Day, right? It's Christmas Eve, and they're like, we're going to induce you tomorrow as long as you don't go into labor tonight.
Right.
Your due date is now. It's December the 25th. So I do feel like we should have focused a little bit more on the holiday and her rejection of it, being like, absolutely not. Now, I didn't see the remake. I'm sure it's garbage in comparison to this, because I have no doubt that this American remake has been watered down. And unfortunately, with a film like this, the visceral aspect of this film is necessary. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that, some people are very against violence and gore and whatever, but like, this film's violence is kind of the point. The in It's because what we end up finding out about our killer is that she violently stripped her life away,
Yeah.
and she is getting revenge and ultimately trying to make a wrong right. Now, this film actually is fairly similar in concept. It's not a car accident, it's a lawsuit, but it's actually like it has similarities to a movie we do need to discuss on the channel when we were doing all our 90s thrillers, to The Hand That Rocks the
Oh,
Cradle,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So Paige loses her kid, and she wants, the woman's kid who took her kid away from her,
Yeah, right.
and she's
Right.
going to violently rip apart her life to prove her point and destroy her from the inside
Yes.
and take her child from her as she's like, taking her last breath and
Yeah.
realizing she's lost.
Right. Obviously, that one is much more of like psychological warfare and stuff. But I definitely really love and appreciate that this antagonist is a woman, and
Yeah.
I think that like that aspect is it makes a ton of sense as like a mother who gets her child violently killed, and like I just think that that's a really fascinating like avenue to go down, like what somebody would do, especially if they're unstable and like feel like they've already lost everything. And I was just thinking too, because like this movie does have some really good gore sequences to it, and I actually much prefer a movie like this and the gore in it than to something like Terrifier. Like I was just kind of thinking
Agreed.
about how, like, don't get me wrong, I think the Terrifier movies are entertaining, and I think they're totally different films in terms of like the story and everything, but they kind of have started to become, I feel, like shock for shock's sake.
Yeah.
Especially this last one. I feel like there was a lot of like discussion online about it, and like about the gore sequences being like so messed up and so horrible. And I think that there's a lot more like of a gut punch with this one, because when you find out what her motivation is and why she's doing it, it doesn't necessarily make you like empathize with her, but it adds like another level of like pain to the
Mm-hmm.
whole situation. Whereas like in the Terrifier films, it's just kind of like this is a demon clown coming after everybody. Like, and
He doesn't have any
he just takes
purpose.
pleasure in pain.
Yeah.
And like we've seen that so many times, and there is like something to be said about exploring that kind of whole thing, because that exists, of course, like the people who are sadistic,
Sadists.
yeah.
Yeah.
But she's not a sadist, I would say, like by like I feel like
She's
she
made
becomes one,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really interesting. And like as far as the believability of her being able to take out all these police officers and stuff, like I actually think the film is fairly believable, because she, kind of presents herself as like a non-threat at first, and she uses
Sure.
the fact that she's a woman, and like most people like do not like feel threatened by women, to kind of like, she plays with the protagonist boss who comes over, and she like poses as her mother, and then the mom walks in. Like there's a lot of great moments like that where it's like she's kind of getting away with something, but then she gets found out. Same thing with the
Yeah,
police.
she catches people off guard.
Yeah.
And having been a guy that's been out in the world for 42 years now, there's a total difference between dealing with someone who is tough and strong and dealing with someone who is psychotic.
Yeah.
Right? There's a totally different level that you deal with when you're fighting someone who has a screw loose.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would much rather fight someone who is stronger than me but is mentally competent, because they're they're gonna know when to stop.
Yeah, they have like self-preservation still.
There's still something in them
Mm-hmm.
that prevents them from taking it too far. I I got in a fight with this fucking psychopath one time, and he was way weaker than me, and I just kind of was throwing him around like nothing. But it was scaring the fuck out of me because he would not stop, no matter what I did to him, and he just kept being like, "I'm gonna fucking do this as soon as like you stop, or like as soon as this is over, like I'm gonna," and he was threatening my girlfriend's life, and like I genuinely didn't know how to stop him
Well, yeah,
because
because
it
they
was
don't
like,
have that like
so I started to
barrier.
strangle him,
Oh my
thinking I was gonna
God.
scare him into stopping.
Jesus.
I trust me, I didn't know
Yeah.
what else to do. He was fucking, the cops weren't there, and he kept being like, "I'm gonna kill your girlfriend. This is, whatever." And I thought that if I could just scare him enough, he'd quit. And as he's sitting there, I know this is a very personal story, but like he's sitting there and you're strangling him, and I'm like, "Dude, you got to stop. I'm gonna kill you." I had no intention of actually killing the guy, but I thought that if I bluffed him,
Yeah.
he would quit. And I could just see it in his eyes. He was just like, he literally was like
Yeah.
screaming at me, like, "Fucking kill me. I don't care." And he didn't. And I was like, "I'm not committed to this. I'm
Right.
not going to kill this
Yeah.
guy. Fuck, what do I do now?"
Yeah.
Right? And then
Yeah.
finally, like, the cop showed up and everything was resolved in that way. And he was actually taken off to a mental institution eventually after he was done, whatever. But regardless, in that moment, I was like, "Man, I'd rather be being beaten up right now by a tougher guy, because at least at some point he would quit and then I would just be beaten up and whatever." But this, I was like, I genuinely don't know what to do against that,
Yeah.
because a psychopath will never stop. They will never relent. They're never going to quit. Right. So you can hit them all you want. You can do whatever you want to them. And unless they're fucking dead,
Yeah.
they have crazy strength. They have this like mentality of like, "I'm relentless. I'm never quitting."
Yeah. It's I definitely don't mean to like dehumanize people who are like having psychotic breaks or anything, but it kind of reminds me of like zombies. Like in the sense of
Kind of.
like how like zombies will kind of do whatever, like regardless of if they're getting like hurt or you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
they don't have the
They don't
feeling.
even notice the pain. They
Um
just keep walking through it.
yeah, and it's obviously, there are lots of people who do have like psychotic episodes and that we've talked about in the channel before, like that's a whole area of failing in the mental health department in our country and kind of the world at large. But this woman in this is very much that. I mean, like she gets hurt so much. She literally gets her face burnt off.
And she
Um,
won't quit.
and she doesn't stop. And it's there's yeah, there's a lot to go into that. And I feel like one of the things that really bothered me, I guess, in the film, like, is when she's like gonna cut into the protagonist's stomach with the scissors.
Kaylee actually looked away.
I
Couldn't even
actually couldn't
watch.
watch that scene because it was just like, I don't know, just something about someone going into your belly button and like just cutting. And she's like this girl too, like the protagonist, that's one thing. Like she is in labor. Her water breaks. So she's in labor, or at least starting to go into labor, right? And she's losing so much blood, like
Oh my god.
so much
The
blood.
stairs are
And
just
so, I mean,
bleeding.
yeah, I have to hope that like at some point, like she blacks out because like when we see the aftermath of her body, it's just like she's been butchered. I mean, like she just has like broken through her whole stomach and all the organs and everything to get to the womb.
But
And
she's asking her to do it
well, she says
in
it's
that point.
stuck. Yeah, because she's like trying to push and it's stuck.
Yeah.
Um, it's messed up. I definitely thought the kid was dead, but I think that at the end we hear a baby
Oh,
like
the kid's
sound,
alive
so
in
the
the
baby
end.
is alive. But
Yeah.
whether or not this woman's gonna survive very long, I truly don't know.
The last shot is haunting.
It's
All
so
right.
haunting, and
She,
it's so like
her face actually reminds me of the chicken
that's what
terrifier.
I was thinking too,
Yeah.
actually. It's haunting and it's just like so sad and like for so many like levels because it's like imagine this kid too. Like this kid all that happened before like while they were being born like in that process like I feel like that's such a horrible way to enter the world like that's like Dexter like that kid's gonna be messed up but I really do feel like I think that there's probably something to be said obviously I've never been pregnant so I don't know but like I think the experiences that the mom has like and that the baby has while in the womb can still have an impact on like what happens to you as you get older like personality wise and whatever so there's also a really great shot in this that I wasn't expecting where one of the police officers who gets like shot in the head.
His head explodes.
No, the one that's like
Oh.
still alive. Like and his eyes are like all red and he looks like a demon. He looks so scary.
So there's a shot where one of them gets shot in the head and his whole head
Yes,
explodes,
that's
which is
great.
fucking awesome.
Yeah.
But then the other guy, his eyes get burned out because he gets shot by like this stun gun thing that he's carrying
Oh,
around, and like the flash blinds him or
I
like
see.
makes his eyes all red, and then he attacks our protagonist thinking it's the antagonist because he's like blind and like manic and doesn't know what the hell's going on, and attacks her and stabs her. um he really fucks her up. He like hits her in the gut, which is what
Yes.
breaks her water. Yeah, I mean, this is about as hardcore of a, like, a pregnant woman being
Oh
abused
my
of a
God.
movie that you could possibly make.
Yeah, truly.
The thing I was actually trying to say earlier that I completely
Sorry.
got off. No, 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 it wasn't you at
Oh,
all. It
okay.
was me. I completely got off track, like I always do, when I went into the filmography list. But what I was originally trying to say there that I didn't say was I was surprised that this movie gets a pass from a lot of horror fans who love it, being as beloved as it is, because all of the stuff with the baby is very obvious CGI.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And horror fans are like super anti CG. No matter what, it's garbage if there's a single second of CG in a horror movie. There's so many voices like that. I'm just kind of shocked that this movie doesn't get that kind of shit that a lot of other movies do. I feel like if this was an American movie, people would give it more shit because foreign films seem to get a pass on a lot of things for some reason. But I don't know how could you do it practically? Yes. They have a budget that isn't huge, obviously. And I think they spent a lot of it towards gore effects already. Did they have enough left over for, like, they wanted to make the baby inside feel alive and like it was being traumatized, right? Because
Yeah.
the movie starts with a baby getting hit
Yeah.
and bleeding inside the womb, and you think that's our protagonist's baby and that it just survived the crash, but we've come to later find out that that was actually our antagonist's baby
Yeah.
in the wreck, and that was its last moments dying inside of her. Um, the babies look identical. Now, to be
Wow.
fair,
Yeah.
babies all look the fucking same. Just skin color is pretty
Yeah.
much the only difference for the most part. But I yeah, the CG thing. Would it be better if it wasn't CG and they could have figured out a way to show it to you inside it being a little more practical? Yeah, I guess. But
Well,
how do you make a
it's
baby look
yeah.
real and being tousled around and thrown? I don't know.
I think
Better
that's hard.
CG, I guess, would be the
That
best.
might be the only thing because I think like with the CG, we get like some facial expressions from the
Yeah.
baby and like which is really messed up because it's like so clearly distressed and like there's moments where it's like pushing like
Yeah. Oh
that
yeah.
as though
It's
it's like trying to get
like,
away.
get out of here.
Awful. I hate that. That makes me so upset. Yeah, I think like you'd have to have like an animatronic like baby, like a practical baby. And I don't know. It doesn't bother me because I think that those scenes are pretty quick and they're used sparingly. Like it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen enough to like kind of keep you remembering like it's not just the mother, like there's another life in there that's like completely helpless to what's going on outside of it. You know, and like inside the mother's womb is supposed to be like the safest place that you can ever be. Like literally once you come out, everything from there is like dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an interesting juxtaposition of like it should be safe, but it's not.
No.
um yeah, really messed up. I do think that this is probably the most extreme like pregnant woman being attacked, and it's hard to watch, you know, and it's like because that's you never want to, I mean, you don't want to see anybody being hurt like this, but I think everybody kind of has like a natural like urge to protect pregnant women even more, right? Because you know that again, there's a helpless life in there. uh
You think the American version, she survives and they don't cut the baby out? That would be insane to me.
That would be I would hate that actually. I think that's a horrible because I was actually saying when we were talking about it like the other day, it's kind of an interesting thought experiment to see like this like super violent version and then to see a like a less violent version. Just like a comparison. I'm just curious because you never know. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes things can work out
A
differently.
movie like this
But I
isn't for the faint of heart,
yeah, but I
right?
there is yeah.
So dumbing it down for like a more casual audience, there's no point to it in my opinion. Like this this movie is meant to be visceral. It's meant to
Yeah.
upset you. It's not meant to there's not some deep rich story going on here that needs to be explored in some other way, and the violence distracts from the story and they're trying to do it in a way that's more accessible. Like that's I don't see that version of this movie existing. I don't see the point of it. Like it's a pretty simplistic film on its face, right? One woman robs another kid of her kid and she wants her kid as payment for that. So she comes after her, and everyone who gets in the way becomes, you know, part of the murder spree. Because
There
she does not come there with any intention of killing anybody else. That's not her intention. She's bold as fuck, right? She comes to the door. She allows herself to be photographed. She has the cops come. She sneaks in the door, which is a
yes.
fantastic shot because it's like a
Yes.
blink and you miss it kind of thing. And
Very subtle and like
she just
background
like
type stuff.
walks in behind them, and there's
Yeah.
really no focus on it. Great filmmaking
Yes.
there. It probably won't work very well for casual audiences who aren't paying attention and are
Right.
constantly looking at their phones or whatever.
But
You're
that's
gonna
the kind
miss
of
it.
thing that I love.
But you know, that's when she gets inside,
Right.
right? And that's kind of obviously there's like a multi-layer
Yeah,
level
I'm kind of play on
to the
words with that.
word to the title of the film with inside. um but I think that I just don't see how this film is done in a way that is less violent and still packs the same punch that this movie meant to. That's like the whole point of the film is the level of violence that it has as retaliation for what was done to somebody.
Yeah. The American version, the baby, the two women survive and they
Raise the
co-parent.
baby together.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think as far as like what you're saying though, I do think like there's a interesting aspect of the like selfish parent in this as far as like some people like think of their children as like objects essentially, like they want to be parents for selfish reasons in a way, you know? And like that's kind of what is happening here where it's like she isn't really a mother anymore, and like you can tell that because she's trying to steal this other woman's baby at the expense of the baby, right? Like she has to know
She doesn't care
everything
about the
that's
kid.
going through, like this woman is going through, is harming the kid and could kill the kid. So it's like, yeah, there's no empathy or like motherly love in this. It's just that I want that. And so that's something that I think is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think ultimately the violence is in this is a necessary part of the story, and to water it down would probably be to do it a disservice.
Yeah. I really love the performances from our two leads
Mm-hmm.
here. I find that the grieving mother, who is pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
very much comes off as somebody who's apathetic,
Yeah.
who's just done with everything, doesn't want, she absolutely still has this desire, this yearning for what she once had,
Mm-hmm.
but she also knows that she's never getting it back. And I think she honestly would be a dreadful mother.
Yes.
I think there's going to
Yeah.
be nothing but pain in her kid's life. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope I would be wrong on that. I'm hoping that, once the kid comes into the world, that she'd pull it together. But you want to talk about a woman who is destined for postpartum. I mean, she has prepartum.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
was thinking that too. Watching this, I was like, dang, it's not going to get easier after the baby's born for her emotionally.
No, because those first few months are grueling,
Yeah.
and having a partner help you, especially one that you have a kinship with,
Sure.
is paramount to that process of raising a baby, and those first few months they're a lot, and a lot of moms deal with
Postpartum.
the
Yeah.
the ramifications of like um, their biological makeup like shifts because of the
Yeah.
hormones and everything, and when she's already this low, when she's already this fucked up, I can't imagine what she's going to be
Yeah,
like after she
exactly.
has a baby. It would be brutal, and having to, never getting any sleep, and the kid just crying constantly. And, kids react to you and your mental state.
Yeah.
They're very, they kind of mirror you. They're sponges. Kids are always going to be sponge like, and
Excuse me.
they take on your um, emotions.
Yeah.
And if you're like super upset and not doing well, they're going to emulate that. They're going to feel it. And yeah, the kid's going to be even harder to deal with, and it's going to be like this vicious uh cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see any good things coming out of their future if this woman didn't come into their life. But I mean, it's even worse
Yeah,
when she
now it's even
does.
worse.
But the antagonist too, I mean, she absolutely feels like a completely like psychotic, gone
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
She just is. She's committed to this fully. When people show up and she kind of just has to act on the fly, um and she has to call audibles, and basically she's just like, fuck it. Like, she's so clever
Yeah, she is.
in
She's
how
very
she
smart.
deals with these
Yeah.
situations, and gets the upper hand by using the fact that a lot of people just don't look at women as threats.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I really, really enjoy both of them, and I
Mm-hmm.
think they make the film. I'm curious to see this American version.
I am
I'm
curious
sure it's
too.
garbage.
Yeah.
I really believe it is, because I don't think they're going to commit. I think
Mm-hmm.
what they're going to do is they're going to try to Americanize it, and they're going to take out all of like the hard hitting moments, and that just is going to take away from the experience. And it's
Yeah.
like, what's the point? What more are you bringing? Like with the Speak No Evil remake, I actually think there is merit to that one. I think it's an interesting um, alternate reality
Yeah.
version of like, what would it be like if you put an American in this situation, because we are dealing with two completely different cultures. And the first one is a like a knock on polite society, in like Scandinavian, Danish type countries. And I think that there is a lot to be said there, even though I don't personally enjoy the experience, and that's kind of the point. I think it's cool to see this alternate reality version of like literally putting Americans in the exact same situation and seeing how they would react, versus how other country societies would react. And I think actually think that that's fun to discuss. Like, yeah, this probably is how Americans would react. They would definitely fight harder in these situations because we are like a gun culture, and like
Yeah.
we're always ready. We're cowboys, right? We're always ready to go to war
Yeah.
at a drop of a hat. But with this, I don't see an American version adding anything.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious, but I'm also like kind of skeptical, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
So for those of you who have seen the American version, I have no doubt it's garbage. One scene I did find odd in here is that she has a woman show up at her door antagonizing her like in the Strangers movie. She comes and is like knocking at the door, talking, and then like goes to her back window and stands there and lights up a cigarette and lets her take photographs of her. This is a very unsettling event,
yeah.
right? And she's a pregnant woman, who's fending for the life of her child. So for her to go then after calling the police and locking herself in a dark room and developing photos
Yeah.
and getting photos to show the cops. I don't know how long it takes to develop a photograph. I guess if you're quick with it, maybe only a few minutes. I don't know the process it takes for that. If you're a professional photographer and you have a dark room set up with all the chemicals and everything already uh, ready to go, it just feels like a weird moment to just be like, I'm gonna go somewhere in my house and take my eyes off of the entrances to this place and wait for the cops. And the fact that the cops don't show up until after she's developed these photos,
Yeah.
it seems like a moment where she's kind of like taking a breather and
Mm.
relaxing, and like, I'm just gonna go work on photos when there's someone trying to break into my house and I have a bunch of glass windows around. Like, I don't know. It felt odd, and it felt like a weird time jump of like, are you guys gonna get there anytime soon? She has time
Yeah.
to go develop photos.
That feels fair. I think it probably is a fairly quick process though, and she is a professional photographer, so she does have it like all like ready to go. And I think that that's kind of why, because she's a professional photographer, she really understands the importance of photos, and it's a really eerie picture too. So I'm glad we get it because it does perfectly capture like what she sees when she's looking out at her through the glass, which is very like a phantom like face. Uh,
When the cops come up the stairs and are at the bathroom, and then he sends the other guy down, and the other guy's getting stabbed by her, and the cops up there with her in the bathroom and like trying to move the stuff. Her being able to attack that guy and the other cop upstairs not hearing it, not going down. And then of course probably the biggest issue I have with the film for sure, and it's a movie, so you kind of just got to roll with it, but sometimes it's hard to overlook obvious glaring decision flaws. But the fact that no cop ever calls for backup,
yeah,
when like a lot of these guys, they look like they're like out of
they're kind
uniform,
of
off duty.
one of them. I think is because there's like some protests going on in this city,
Yeah,
and like they pick up a kid that they're
this poor
this
kid
poor
gets
kid.
roped into this shit.
Like yeah, like they're kind of like in this mindset like of trying to break up like riots and protesters, and like
Well, if
versus
that's even more
I
to my
know you're
point,
like
then
they
then they
should
would
have like
definitely
a
have a
riot
radio on
gear.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're just like very caught off guard, but I appreciate that like they they go to check up on her, and of course the antagonist answers posing as the woman, and they're like, wait a minute, like she's supposed to be pregnant, like that's not a pregnant woman. So I like that that at least happens.
If
But
you found dead bodies in that place, you would
yeah,
immediately
yeah,
go to call for backup, A. And B,
yeah,
you would not bring some young kid who you're arrested for nothing
yeah, I
into a
do.
murder
I
situation.
agree. I think that him coming in is like ridiculous.
It's
And
absurd.
it's so sad because he does die pretty horribly.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's a little silly as far as that goes, but I mean, overall, I think that like you can kind of like those aspects don't bother me as much because I think there's so many other like strengths in the film.
Yeah.
So I can kind of like overlook those little bits.
Can someone explain to me why she gives herself a tracheotomy and
Oh
then
yeah, we were
like
confused by
tapes it
this.
back up?
She
So,
was like suffocating.
but then she opens up her throat and then tapes it up. This doesn't make any sense to me. So,
Yeah.
if you were to have some kind of like issue where you couldn't breathe, like in Saw 5 with Strom, and he does the tracheotomy and he sticks the, so number one, you have to actually put a tube in there to breathe through, because if you just cut into it and open it up, it would just seal back into itself, right? Like the wound closes immediately because there has to be something opening it and keeping it open so you can breathe through it. So she does that, and then she pulls it out, and like some kind of like air rushes out of it, but she's not really breathing, and then she tapes it up. So like you either have something that's preventing you from breathing and you have to do the tracheotomy, and if you do that, you have to continue to have it, right, until the obstruction or whatever is dislodged, and you can breathe through your mouth again. This has to be kept. So why she then immediately tapes it up right after that,
Yeah.
I don't understand that scene
I
at
don't
all.
either. I don't know at all.
Like what I don't even know what happens to her. She gets, if my memory serves, because I think this is the scene that I was laughing about, because my arguably my favorite Christmas movie ever is Scrooged, and my like favorite line in the movie is "the bitch hit me with a toaster."
Yeah, this is when she gets hit in the
She
face.
gets hit by in the face by a toaster,
Yeah.
and I was laughing because I think we watched Scrooged the
The night
next
before.
the night before, so I
Yeah.
was like, the bitch hit me with a toaster. She gets hit in the face, and then she's like, pushes the girl off. They get into a fight. She gets her away, and then she stabs herself in the throat, but then tapes it up.
Yeah. I
I
don't
I
know.
didn't understand that scene at
I don't
all.
have an explanation.
So anybody got anything on this? Because I even looked it up. I went into the Wikipedia, because sometimes on Wikipedia, they'll detail everything out, and somebody I thought maybe would write like, and then she gives herself a tracheotomy because
Yeah.
something, and I was gonna be like, oh, she, because of this. I couldn't figure that out for the life of me. I didn't rewind it to see if maybe I missed something. So for anybody who's seen this movie a bunch, what the fuck is she doing there? I don't get that at all. But yeah, I mean, we kind of mentioned it, but probably the best shot in it. I don't really know how it works. I don't really care because it's so good. Is when she's on the couch, and the chick kind of comes in and like floats behind
So
her, like
scary.
floats out of the room, and her
So
face is just
scary.
becomes more and more obscured by the darkness, but it's still kind of like flickering in the
Oh, I
background
love
as it's
it.
like trying to capture her in the darkness.
Easily
And
my
slides away.
Yeah, easily my
Great shit.
favorite shot of the whole movie. I think that's so eerie, and that's what I was saying where I feel like up to that point I was like this is supernatural. Like that's a ghost. That's something. Like what
Mm.
is that? And then it very much is not that, of course, but I think that that has the same kind of atmosphere as like a supernaturally like ghost story or something. Which I like it cuz she is kind of like a ghost, right? Like she sort of did die in that car accident, and this is like her coming back to haunt and take revenge. So, yeah, Merry Christmas.
Another scene that I find funny is, as a parent, when you're having a kid, or like the very first year of your kid's life, you I guess after you've had a kid for a little while, people let up on you. It depends on, if you talk to someone who's had kids longer, they'll always try to be like, just wait.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
gets so much worse. But when you first have a kid, people love to like take their traumatic experiences with
Oh,
kids
right.
and like hang them over you and be like, it's going to be the worst thing ever.
Or like it can't be any worse than what I went through.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
she's in the hospital, and some nurse is like trying to light up a cigarette next to a pregnant woman in the lobby of a hospital, which
Yeah.
is crazy. And she's just like telling her how like crazy it's gonna be, and
She tells her she's like I was in labor for 18
yeah.
hours and I gave birth to a stillborn. So like that's messed up to
So
tell
she's just
someone.
jealous that this
Yeah.
chick has,
Well, she said she's
a
had like
baby.
5 kids or something. Like she says she's done it
I
a
guess
bunch,
that's
but
right.
then she was like, my first one though was
The first
18
is the
hours.
worst,
Yeah,
is
and he
what she
was
says.
dead.
Yeah, the first is the worst.
So that's really, really messed up to hear. But she's like, our protagonist is just like,
I don't know what this
she's,
desire is. I don't know why.
yeah.
I don't know why parents want to scare
I don't
other
either.
parents.
I've also heard like one of the things too, like especially for women, is like
It's trauma
it's
bonding.
how it's how horrible the pregnant like the birth process is. And it was funny because I was talking to anyway, a mother of a friend of our family, and she was like, all I heard like before I gave birth, like you always see women in movies and they're screaming their heads off and they're in agony, and she's like, it wasn't that bad. But I think that's probably like, I think everyone probably
So
has a unique
yeah,
experience, right? And depending on how much drugs you take too, because that's the other thing with modern medicine, is that you can have a completely painless birth with an epidural and stuff, or at least close to painless as possible. But
everybody's body's different,
everyone's body is different.
right?
So I'm sure
This,
some, just like some women have horrible periods, I'm sure some women have like super easy pregnancies
oh yeah,
and labors
I've
and
talked to
everything.
all types. I've talked to girls who are like, my pregnancy was fine. Like it was pretty quick, pretty, it was like, it hurt, but it wasn't that crazy. And then I've talked to other women who are like, I almost died.
Yeah.
It's the fucking worst thing I've ever had happen to me. And I think that both, are probably true for each one of them. They just
Yeah.
have different experiences because their bodies are different. They have different pain thresholds. They
Yeah.
have different physiologies, right? Like they have, their
It's just different.
vaginas are
Yeah, exactly.
different,
The hips and
their hips
everything.
and
Yeah.
everything.
So
So,
everyone's
and
unique.
size of baby definitely makes a
Yes.
difference, right? There's a
Yeah.
difference between pushing out an 11-pound baby versus a 5-pound
I
baby,
was
obviously.
4 pounds.
I was 11.
I was like a preemie though. So
Yeah. Anyway,
anyway,
that's that. Merry
Merry
Christmas. This will
Christmas,
be
Happy Holidays.
the last slasher Sunday before Christmas, and
Yeah.
probably one of our last videos before Christmas. So,
Yeah.
anyway, that was a long one. And let us know about the American one.
Yeah.
And have you seen this one? I hope so. If you've sat through this,
I do too.
but if not, check it out. Great
Yeah.
film. And we'll see you soon enough.
Yes.
Adios.
Bye.